What if the one you think he's holding back is actually falling harder than even he realizes? What if behind every hesitation, every quiet stare, every small act of kindness, there's a love too deep for him to name? This isn't about what he says, it's about what he does when he thinks no one's watching. Because sometimes, the most powerful love isn't declared, it's discovered. And he may be more in love with you than even he knows. Let me show you how to recognize it. Love often begins long before it's declared. It doesn't announce itself with a grand gesture or a poetic confession. Instead, it lives in the everyday moments that seem small on the surface, but echo loudly when we look closer. People often search for words to confirm what their hearts already feel, yet love has a way of showing itself through action long before it's ever spoken aloud. When someone truly cares, you start to notice patterns. It's the way they anticipate your needs, even when you haven't voiced them. It's the thoughtful gesture that seems random, but actually stems from something you mentioned in passing weeks ago. There's a certain attentiveness that doesn't come from obligation. It's intuitive, almost reflexive. It's a consistent presence that shows up not only in moments of celebration, but especially in moments of silence, struggle, or uncertainty. When someone acts out of love without labeling it as such, those actions are louder than any declaration could ever be. There's a kind of intimacy that's built not on dramatic declarations, but on the reliability of someone who remembers your favorite drink, checks in after your hard day, and stands beside you when no one else notices your quiet pain. These are the moments that build trust, and trust is where love plants its deepest roots. It's easy to get caught up waiting for the big phrase, for the words that finally confirm the feelings you suspect. But real connection is often already evident in 100 unspoken ways. Love isn't always loud, but it is always consistent. There's also a kind of selflessness that emerges when affection deepens. It's not about losing oneself in the other, it's about genuinely wanting the other person's happiness, even when it's inconvenient. It shows up when someone goes out of their way to make your life a little easier, even if it means making theirs a little harder. They might not even realize why they're doing it, they just feel compelled to protect your peace, to support your growth, to be someone you can lean on. This instinct doesn't come from logic or obligation, it comes from an emotional place they might not have even identified yet. Love doesn't wait for perfect timing, it creeps in through the mundane. It's in the way someone sends a message just to check if you made it home safe. It's in the way they remember what matters to you, even when you forget to remind them. It's in how they hold space for your flaws without trying to fix you. These are the moments where affection transforms into devotion. And often, the one showing this devotion hasn't stopped to label it. They're just doing what feels right, what feels natural. When they care more than they're aware, there's often a disconnect between emotional awareness and emotional behavior. Someone might not have the vocabulary to describe what's happening in their heart, but their behavior tells the story anyway. You can see it in their eyes when they look at you with quiet concern. You can feel it in the subtle tension when you're distant. You can sense it in the way they light up around you, how your presence alters their energy, calms their restlessness. Love begins long before it's clear and long before it's confessed. When someone starts planning around you instead of around themselves, when they begin to factor you into their future without even noticing it, it's another signal. Their conversations. Love doesn't always begin with fireworks or declarations. Often, it begins in a space that feels safe, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. That kind of space can't be forced or faked. It's created when someone feels fully seen, accepted, and understood. Emotional safety is what allows walls to come down and the real connection to begin. Without it, no matter how strong the attraction or how frequent the communication, the bond can only go so far. Emotional safety is the silent force that lets affection deepen into something lasting. Many people aren't used to feeling safe enough to open up. They've learned to hide vulnerability behind distractions, humor, or silence. They're not necessarily guarded because they're uninterested. More often, they're trying to protect parts of themselves that have been misunderstood or dismissed in the past. When they find themselves in the presence of someone who listens without judgment, who allows them to be imperfect without making them feel broken, something powerful begins to shift. In that environment of safety, real conversations start to happen. Not just the surface level talk about plans, goals, or events, but the deep things, the real things, the fears that rarely get voiced, the doubts that are usually buried, the dreams that seem too fragile to share with just anyone. And suddenly, those parts of a person that were once hidden begin to see the light. They feel valued, not for what they can do, not for how they look, but for who they are. That's where emotional connection becomes real. People fall in love with how they feel around someone, not necessarily with their words or even their actions alone, but with how safe, seen, and understood they feel in their presence. It's not about agreeing on everything or never having conflict. It's about knowing that when conflict does arise, it can be handled with respect and care. It's about knowing that emotions won't be weaponized, that silence won't be used as punishment, and that honesty won't be met with harshness. In emotional safety, there's room to breathe. There's room to make mistakes and still feel worthy. There's room to be both strong and soft. The connection doesn't demand perfection. It invites authenticity. It tells a person that they don't have to perform. They don't have to impress. They just have to show up. And showing up becomes easier when there's no fear of being shamed or abandoned for being real. When someone begins to trust that they won't be judged for their feelings, they start sharing more freely. They let the quiet parts of themselves rise to the surface. The more they feel that their truth is welcomed, the more comfortable they become with embracing it. That's the kind of openness that love needs to grow, not the kind built on constant reassurance or high drama, but the kind that's rooted in steady presence and emotional grounding. This kind of connection is rare because many people have never truly felt it before. They're used to relationships that challenge their self-worth instead of reinforcing it. They're used to being told that their emotions are too much or not enough. So when someone comes along who holds space for them to just be, it's disarming in the most beautiful way. It breaks down the defenses they didn't even know they had, and love begins to take root quietly in that space. It's not uncommon for someone to feel deeply before they realize what they're feeling. Emotional safety accelerates that process, not by pressuring it, but by allowing it. And emotional safety truly saves your life, not by denying it. It creates a foundation where someone can explore their emotions without fear of consequence. The feeling of being emotionally safe becomes addictive, not because it provides a thrill, but because it offers a rare sense of peace. And love often begins in that peace, long before it's recognized for what it truly is. Emotional intimacy requires more than shared interests or physical chemistry. It requires vulnerability, which can only exist when safety is present. When someone feels that they can open up and not be judged, criticized, or misunderstood, their natural inclination is to open even more. That openness leads to connection, and that connection leads to a deepening emotional bond. What might start as comfort quickly grows into trust, and from trust comes affection, care, and love. Love isn't always born in excitement, it's born in safety. It grows in quiet, consistent moments of presence and reassurance. The kind of love that lasts doesn't rely on intensity, it relies on understanding, patience, and the quiet belief that one's emotions are safe in the hands of another. When someone feels that they can rest in the emotional space shared with another person, they begin to associate that space with home. And once something feels like home, it becomes much harder to ignore or walk away from. Most people don't realize how much they crave safety until they finally experience it. It changes the way they communicate, the way they express affection, the way they commit. It calms the part of the mind that's always looking for an exit, and it softens the heart that's grown used to defending itself. Love doesn't need fireworks to start, it needs space to land, and emotional safety is that landing place, the quiet ground where love builds its foundation, sometimes without even being noticed until it's fully formed. Emotions can be intense, complicated, and deeply rooted, yet not always easy to express. In many cases, emotional restraint isn't a lack of feeling, it's a fear of vulnerability. The heart may be filled with warmth, care, and even love, but the mind holds back from exposing those truths. This restraint isn't a signal of disinterest or coldness, rather it reflects a deeply ingrained tension between what is felt and what is safe to reveal. For many, holding back emotions isn't about withholding them, it's about self-protection. Throughout life, people are often taught to control how much they show, especially when it comes to vulnerability. They're told that to appear strong, they must not be too open, too soft, too affected. And over time, this message settles into their behavior. They become masters at maintaining composure, even when their hearts are racing. They offer guarded smiles instead of confessions. They choose silence when words might expose too much. But beneath that quiet exterior, a storm of emotion often brews, unspoken, unexplored, and sometimes even unknown to them. Love has a unique way of pushing against those internal boundaries. It stirs feelings that are hard to ignore, but just as hard to articulate. Someone might find themselves caring more deeply than expected, thinking about another person more often than they admit, feeling drawn towards someone without being able to explain why. And even when those emotions are overwhelming, the instinct to hide them can be stronger, not because the feelings are weak, but because they are so powerful that exposing them feels risky. There's a subtle conflict that takes place within. One part wants to lean in, while another pulls away. This conflict isn't always visible, but it manifests in small moments. A long pause before answering a question, a fleeting glance that lingers just a second too long, a quiet withdrawal after a particularly meaningful interaction. These signs can be confusing on the surface, but they're often clues to a deeper emotional experience unfolding silently beneath it all. Vulnerability isn't just about saying how one feels. It's about being willing to be seen. It's about allowing another person to witness not just the polished version, but the raw, real, and sometimes messy parts. For someone who has built their identity around control and self-sufficiency, this can feel daunting. Not because they lack depth or emotion, but because showing that depth can feel like giving away power. And love, in its truest form, often demands surrender. We are here because of love, and love for me. And for someone who has spent more than 2 centuries thinking they are too small and too feeble, this book can give you vista. There are moments when someone will distance themselves, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. They might seem uninterested or detached, when in reality they're overwhelmed by emotions they don't know how to process. Their mind races with what ifs. What if they get hurt? What if they're misunderstood? What if they lose themselves in the process? These fears don't mean the love isn't real. They mean the love is strong enough to threaten the walls that have kept them safe for so long. Many people navigate love cautiously because of past wounds. They've been hurt by opening up too soon, or trusting the wrong person, or believing in something that eventually collapsed. Those memories don't just fade, they shape how they approach every new connection. Even when they meet someone who makes them feel alive, their instinct might still be to hold back. Not out of cruelty or indifference, but because their heart is still learning how to feel safe again. Love doesn't always look like open arms and easy words. Sometimes it looks like hesitation, tension, and even resistance. But if you look closely, you'll notice the cracks in the armor. You'll see the care in their concern, the affection in their silence, the attachment in the way they check in, even when they pretend it's casual. These gestures may be small, but they are profound. They reveal an internal struggle between the desire to connect and the fear of being fully known. There's often a turning point, a moment when holding back starts to feel more painful than risking openness, when the longing to connect overpowers the fear of exposure. But that point is reached slowly, through trust, consistency, and emotional safety. It can't be forced or rushed. It has to unfold naturally, in an environment where the person feels free to explore their feelings without judgment or pressure. Only then do the walls begin to lower, and the true depth of emotion starts to rise to the surface. It's easy to misunderstand emotional restraint as indifference, but they are not the same. Some of the deepest feelings live behind the thickest walls. And sometimes, the strongest emotions are the ones hardest to speak. But in the small ways someone shows up, in how they protect, how they listen, how they remember, you can find evidence of the emotional truth they're still learning how to express. Love, in these cases, isn't absent. It's simply unspoken, quietly waiting for the moment it feels safe enough to be named. When someone cares deeply, their behavior will often contradict their silence. Their presence, their consistency, their attentiveness, all of it will betray feelings they haven't dared to verbalize. These behaviors are not random. They are reflections of a heart that is slowly inching toward openness, even if the words haven't followed yet. Emotional restraint can be frustrating, but it is also deeply human. It's the mind's way of protecting the heart, even when the heart is ready to leap. True connection doesn't require perfect communication from the start. It requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to see beyond the surface. Behind every act of emotional restraint is a story, a history, a reason, and when someone feels they are finally with a person who won't judge them for those reasons, who will meet their guardedness with grace instead of pressure, love becomes not only possible, it becomes inevitable.